watch it here. And this one is, I don't think, I've watched about 4 or 5 minutes of it. Um, I don't think this one's about alligator rape, but I'm not sure we'll get there. So, okay. I just think, you know, you're projecting a lot of things on all SJWs. You're not willing to accept that there's different kinds, and the point of talking to many of the people that might be SJWs or not, or whatever their views and topics we discuss, is you're talking to multiple people to find out their different approaches to it, right? So you don't see me go looking for the most knuckle dragging anti SJWs, and then they say terrible things, and then I throw them what they say at you, do I? No, but that's what you try to do. So why is that? And also, you just got this misunderstanding. You think that the whole SJW idea, the whole activism idea, then is, which is weird since you claim, and I believe you have history in activism, experience with it, whatever. Um, you seem to think that we're all about saving the world for other people. And that's why if you find 100 people that all have this view you think you're talking about, it's still worth finding out my version, especially since my version is both older and is going to live longer into the future. So I'm not against you deconstructing those this more confused versions. You're doing me a favor. Otherwise, I also have to do that as well. So that's fine. But when you think that, me trying to change the world to be more like I want it to be, yeah, I could tell myself it's because I'm a great person, and that's why, because it'd be better for you. But that's not why. I do believe it would be better for you and better for me, but I'm doing it because of the better for me part. The part where I would like the world that way. And better for me doesn't mean that I would necessarily fare better or make more money or be happier or in anything like that. It's the world that I want. Of course, it's related to the fact that, yeah, if I'd been born into the kind of world I want, I think it would be better. I would enjoy it better. It would have been a better condition to be in. On the other hand, whatever, we're here in the middle of the history, just like always, and there's further yet to go. And if I was born in this better future, if we were fortunate enough for it to happen, I'd probably still see improvements that could be made and not want to have slide back. So let's see um, how this exercise in what might be futility goes, because you just keep saying the same thing about our motivations, and I don't think that you really are trying to understand uh, what I'm telling you um, about. You bring this up about what makes you so special that we need you. I'm fighting for the world I want. You're not, so I'm not saying you need me to fight for the world you want, right?
Get insulted when we insult you? Why do you anti SJWs get insulted when we insult you? And you see how stupid this is. This is stuff they should know.
I guess he was in the middle of this is something Heithel Day had said. I haven't seen that Heithel Day video. I queued it up, but I haven't watched it yet.
And Hythloday mentioned this thing about it being an intellectual competition, or people saber rattling and trying to say how intellectual they are. Well, it's not too hard to beat these SJWs on the bit with the intellectual stuff, because the thing is that the whole thing about being an SJW is that you think you have a perspective on things that other people do not. You think you know the truth where other people do not. You think that your help is needed and wanted, and you have to do this. And what these SJWs are told over and over and over again is, we don't need you, we don't want you, we don't want your help. We don't want you trying to change things, trying to speed up your evolution or whatever. and see they can't accept this, right? And
Well, I think you're fooling yourself. A lot of people do say they want our help. A lot of people do join our perspective more and more every decade. So, if you're really saying that we should respect the trend of people want us to shut up, well, no, because I remember in the 70s and 80s and 90s, in the 90s where John McCain is making jokes about how ugly the first baby, Chelsea Clinton, is, and now he would never think of doing that. So people don't want it. That's disputable. But also, people didn't want the abolitionists. People didn't want. Who cares? We're changing society by definition. People tend to say they want things to be the way they're used to them. And do they really? Is that really their best situation? I don't think so. But I'm really judging mostly based on whether I feel I would be in a better situation. Um, what you're really talking about is a group that wants certain advice or demands to be lessened. You don't want us to be telling you whether rape humor is acceptable. I say, well, you don't. I know you draw a line somewhere on what is acceptable locker room talk, like joking about murdering people. Are you supposed to just go ha ha and take part in that too, or joking about pedophilia in the rectory? Or no, there's lines, and frankly, I think you're kind of whiny about the fact that uh, you you won't face. Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to censor your rape porn. I don't want. I just want to call it out, and I don't want to vote for people that think that way. And I'm going to feel free to argue against voting for people that think that uh, women can't get pregnant from rape, things like that. On the other hand, when I brought it up with Trump, it was really just to say, see, everybody's always denying that this kind of attitude exists. That's ancient. People don't think that way anymore. And then when it comes onto tape, people are like, well, we know that exists. Right. So it does exist. And, I was already 100 times not going to vote for Trump out of more substantive things, like he wants to bomb uh, the innocent relatives of terrorists, and he says he loves war, and he thinks that we should um, possibly go to war when a sailor taunts us from their boat, and things like this. I disagree with.
so then they want to throw, oh, well, I have the scientific study, I have this data. And when we check out anything they have, it always proves them wrong.
Really, so every single point on my side, because I make pretty clear, I acknowledge points on the other side. For example, that there are real men's rights issues and the indispensable male is a true thing. And, sorry, the disposable male, indispensable, I wish. Um, but your position is that every single science. So, for example, when I say, well, look, women can't drive in Saudi Arabia, and you check up on that, it proved wrong. Or you mean like the wage gap that you guys have your head deep up your ass? The studies are very clear that doctors who have PhDs, who work full time, the same kind of limitations as the men in their practices, make less money as doctors, lawyers, the high end. The low end, there's a few women make more. But at the high end professions, there is wage gap. And you could say it's deserved because of their skill, but all this stuff about it's because of part time and maternity leave. No, no, people know how to account for that. So you go to studies like that and you go, no, I'm still seeing what I want to see. Again, it doesn't matter. Those studies do not. I I am not for censoring video games, and those studies to me are information about how they do interact with society. And as I have said, Video games are not the cause of violence in a society that's had violence for thousands of years before video games. What they are is a reflection on the violence that we already have, the way we already are.
or it's inconclusive in some way. The bit with video games, where video game data, they're like, oh, video games lead to violence. And
Actually, the studies never said that, and when I have quoted these studies, I have quoted them accurately. If you are prone to violence, it will elicit that, right? It will evoke that. So, on the other hand, it doesn't make me violent to play. Like one time I overheard this conversation when I was eating some food down at the university. I was taking a class at the time, and a guy behind there was joking with his friend. He was like, "This weekend I got pulled over and I've been playing so much Grand Theft Auto, I had a thought of just gunning it." Ha ha. It was a joke. He didn't gun it. He wasn't really very close to that, but he had that vision in his mind. Well, some people, when that washed over their mind, might go for it. But whatever, I still wouldn't blame the video game. This is a different kind of psychology of someone close to doing something silly. Um, anyway, and in my case, there's absolutely no effect like that. To me, it's such a fantasy. And yet, I never really liked the missions. They seem stupid to me. But I do like, stealing cars and run around the city until the cops in Grand Theft Auto catch you. And it's never made me want to do that in real life. So, however, the studies do show that if you play a violent video game and then ask questions about, hey, what would you do in the following situation, it provokes more aggressive answers, right? It doesn't turn you into um, Jeffrey Dahmer or whoever, playing a video game, watching Saw. But if you're tending towards that already, it certainly gets you all excited. It's just like the friend that I had mentioned before, who we were talking. This was when I was in my 20s. He was saying, I saw the rape scene in Clockwork Orange, and I found it titillating, and that it was pause for thought for me. Why would that be? He wasn't feeling bad. I didn't make him feel bad. Nobody felt bad. We thought, yeah, that's interesting. That's why art is good, because you can get some reflection on yourself in basically a safe situation where you can, have a thought experiment that can be pretty realistic feeling, and yet, you were not in any situation that you have to have any material concern about being a bad person, having done a bad thing. But it's silly to me if you don't think that media is a part of our mental conversations and how we think and how our thoughts evolve. And again, you're going to forget I am all for challenging art like this. I don't say don't have these themes in video games. I think it's stupid that they dominate video games, and possibly having this critical conversation will get it down so that we've got things like an analysis of the emotions and culture and rape and crime uh, at the hands of someone like Stanley Kubrick, instead of it just being every schlock art recapitulates it.
I have put forth to Pyrrho and to Hythloday before to provide data, which they did not, and I did. And the data.
Okay, first of all, I have provided data to you and others when I asked. On the other hand, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time studying a bunch of data that isn't the motivation for my thinking on this anyway. It is clear that the data says what I had just said, and it's also clear that I don't want to censor video games. Qntkka? So what point are you fucking making? You're telling me to defend not my argument.
Data that I provided showed that.
Do you really not remember that I have said 1,000 times I don't want to censor video games and I think violence in art reflects the attitudes of society, it does not generate them?
As video game.
If you indulge in a thought over and over and over and over, then you are regenerating that idea. If you keep making artwork and buying lots of it, yeah, that can take you in a direction. You're going in that direction. You're producing and using the art to go in that direction because you think it feels good for other reasons besides the art. So I don't have to defend not my argument. Okay?
Game sales go up.
See, you're the first world problem person here. It's like we don't need this as the first world. And I say, well, it's an international thing. And what about Malala? What about driving? What about rape jokes? And you don't want to face those. You want to go, well, what about? That is a very well explored area. And it seems clear to me that it's just like all of the psychological studies have in common. You can prime people. If you show people a bunch of circus images and then you ask them to recognize things like really fast images, they'll be primed. They'll be able to recognize the circus things, even ones you didn't show them but are related, quicker than things, just random things from other domains that aren't circus related. And it's the same thing with the video game. And if you want to talk about video games, then I want to talk about the philosophy of what you pretend and why. And I've never, ever once, I don't even have an argument that would benefit from saying video games cause violence. Okay? Just to be clear, these views of mine come from before there even was video games. And I don't believe in censorship. I believe in having these things in the media is like having thought experiments where we can talk it through. You want to have the thought experiments, but don't talk about it because it's okay. No, we're going to have those movies and Apocalypse Now and all of the things that are difficult to think about so that we could talk about them.
And video game usage goes up. Violent crimes go down, right? So now this is not to say, and I've stated this, and the studies state this. This is not to say that the violence goes down because people play video games. You could draw that conclusion, but that would be speculative. It wouldn't be very scientific to just assume that. Yet these so-called scientists and so-called researchers, so-called academics, and actual academics on the SJW side of this, they will say, well, I saw a study that, and then you call them on it, and they don't provide.
But not me. But you mentioned my name in this video, but none of this so far is my argument.
Anything. Now, I had this with Kazoom, who claims to not be an SJW and not an anti-SJW, but clearly he is an SJW. And he tried to say that obesity was, that somehow people could be obese and healthy, which by definition, you cannot be obese and healthy. And when I stated that, that wasn't a low blow, that wasn't a jab, that wasn't an emotional attack. That was a statement of fact, of fact that should be known.
It's not so much that it's a known fact, it's either true by definition or not necessarily true. Because if you're talking about someone that people might call obese or the body mass index definition, none of those things are 100% absolutely the way it should be defined. So, some people might have a metabolism where it's actually more healthy for them to be at another number, just like hippopotamus carry around a lot of fat. So, I agree with you. By definition, obesity is an illness. On the other hand, if you're talking about heavy people, yeah, a heavy set person can be healthy. So a person with extra weight can be healthy. You can have strong muscles underneath a lot of fat. You can see that there's a lot of pro athletes in football and other sports where it isn't a disadvantage. They carry a lot of extra weight that is fat and they're healthy. So it depends. You want to say, well, okay, I agree with you. By definition, those people might be fat, they might be heavy, they might be non technical terms. Obesity is the name of an illness these days. There's a technical definition.
And this is arguing that obesity is somehow healthy is.
Well, it doesn't sound like he said that, right? What you just said he said was that you could be healthy and obese. That's not the same thing as saying obesity is healthy.
Similar to the arguments that that science is sexist or science is a product of colonialism and and we should go back to magic, right? We do know this stuff can be studied. This stuff has been studied. It's not up for debate. Now, it doesn't matter if you have a good idea, if you think you have a good idea, and you feel
See, why do you think you have the truth, right? You put it on the SJWs, but we think we have the truth and stuff, and I'm saying, well, I think things come down to different preferences. You disagree with that. You seem to think you have the truth, and you seem to think you want to sit behind the camera and have to tell us about things beyond debate. Isn't that what you're complaining the SJWs do? And isn't it true that I'm not doing that? So aren't I the one that's following the rules you supposedly espouse when you're criticizing others, but perpetuate and perpetrate when you're speaking of your own ideas? Did you hear that part?
really passionate about it, um, nobody gives a shit. You have to be able to test that somehow. You have to be able to prove that that's a good idea. These SJWs, these feminists, have yet to prove anything uh, about how positive their movement is, about all the great things their movement has done, because they take credit for stuff that if it's a feminist, they might take credit for stuff that women's rights activists.
So you do you think then you're saying that women, for example, might have got the vote without women suffer, without first wave feminism? Is that your position? Because so what? I think that's silly, and it would not mean that people can't advocate for something that's coming. Maybe that's why people start advocating. They see it coming. Maybe that's a necessary part of it actually happening is that people get on this bandwagon, maybe after it's inevitable. So what? That would not mean that I can't work for the world that I want to live in. You're acting like I got to prove that it really does make the world better. It could just be a coincidence that after the start of a worldwide social justice awareness, various times, but I'm thinking of in the 60s, that, the situation of women and transgender and homosexual and civil rights have all improved a lot in the last 50 years. Since then, could just be a coincidence. So what? Then us also showing up and marching and protesting and making sure people understand where we think things need to go, and then they did go there being right about that call just by coincidence, it not happening because of what we did as protesters and activists, but it was happening anyway, but we turned out to be right. That's all a reason that we should stop doing that process. And why is that? So that you could feel better or something? Look, I think the world has gotten to be a better place, social justice wise, over the last 50 years. We're not done yet. I don't have to prove that I that my particular actions accomplish that, but there is a certain amount of common sense to the notion that women didn't have the vote for a long, long time. They didn't have the influence before there was a vote. They were outside of politics for a long, long time. And I somehow think that the growth of activism to change that, I think it's fairly reasonable for me to think it might have been related to why women did get the vote.
Have done. They're not the same thing. Women's rights activists are not always feminist. There is a division there. Um, you
Well, now here's where we go to understanding each other's positions. I have told you that to me, the reason I call myself a feminist, and I call you a feminist, if you went and did something that was working to rectify a gender bias against women, then that is something we call feminism. Just like if you came into a town and were not an activist of any kind, but met some coal miners and found out, oh, they were really being screwed and their kids were working 15 hours in the coal mine and they were being robbed by a rigged company store that charged them just enough that they could never get any freedom or get ahead. And so you went and helped them to rectify that situation, right? You would be a labor rights activist, even if the term never came into your head. Nobody ever thought of it that way, because that's what that kind of activism is called. When you do that because of gender bias differences, then it's uh, feminism. If the gender bias is against women, right? So I don't understand why you can't remember this as you're arguing and make a distinction, and you keep ignoring my statement of my argument and keep talking about this other one that you claim to have discredited. Well, if you've discredited, I accept that. Then I'll move on to a more sophisticated one that I offer. How about that?
You, when you say stuff like, well, when you say that body positive, we must accept people being grossly overweight, obese. Okay, to an extent, it's already a law that there's already laws that protect these people, so we don't need further litigation to accept them. We don't need to be told to accept them. But that's not enough.
Here's the thing. You have to tell me why I need to shut up about those kinds of things. Okay, again, this is not something I talk about a lot, but yeah, I don't care how somebody looks unless, I'm married. It doesn't matter. Most people, even if they look beautiful to me, are not in there's no running of me and them are going to hook up for 99.9% of the people out there in the world. So, yeah, I think we should accept it. But the real issue is, uh, you say we don't need to hear the blah, blah, blah. Who cares what you think you need? Why do I need to stop saying that? We're in a public conversation where we say whatever we think. Why do I need to stop saying that? For example, that picture Vic showed with the guy in drag and the meme text about I want to be in your bathroom or whatever, and I'm like, it doesn't matter to me how that guy looks. I've known doctors and lawyers that go to Burning Man that it look like that sometimes a year, or that they dress crazy for the hookers ball in San Francisco, walking around with all kinds of crazy garb, and then they go back to ordinary lives. And so I don't see a point to judge people on appearances. Now, you don't need to hear that. You don't need to hear that I think other people should be tolerant like me. But you have to come up with the reason that I shouldn't say it. I might not be saying it because you need. So you keep thinking that I and all SJWs want to tell you what to think because you need it. No. I'm telling you what to think because I think it, and possibly I want you to think it. And mostly in this conversation, I'm trying to find out what you think and return the favor of telling you what I think. And I learn more and more about how your opinion and how it differs from Vic's, and how it differences from Sugarland Rents, and how it differences from Noah Plum, and how it differences from Thunderfoot. You, on the other hand, see all of those people on your opposition. You're like, I'm going to get the essence of how they're all exactly the same. Well, that's how you're deluding yourself.
You have to
It's not all the same. We don't all have the same approach or idea about this.
want them. You have to love them. You have to include them in everything. If you're not sexually attracted.
But what do you mean by have to? I know I'm cutting your sentence up kind of a lot here, but what do you mean you have to? Because those people aren't saying there should be a law making you have relationships with people you find unattractive, right? You're saying what really it is if you go into Common Company and say, fat shame someone, everybody's going to go, you're an asshole. Nobody's proposing a law. We're just saying that's fucked up. Nobody's proposing law. Nobody's saying you have to be a good person just because we tell you what we think good persons do in certain situations.
To someone like that, then there's something wrong with you and you must be fixed. and we see this with children, right? Where people say like, well, my child is a boy, but it's supposed to be a girl, so I'm going to raise it as a girl, which should be
So do you think you probably think all SJWs are on the same side of an issue like that, right? We're all exactly the same after all, just like you and Thunderfoot and Sugarland Wren and Noel Plum, all exactly the same person, just different mouths with one idea.
abuse. And we see this with vegetarians, right? There's this whole vegan movement where, and I have nothing against vegetarians or a vegan movement, but when you raise kids that way, or small children, infants, and they start getting all emaciated, they start getting health problems because they don't have the right nutrients, because a vegan won't accept that human beings, at least when they're first born, do require animal products, right? Because they won't accept that, then we have to go with the facts, right? We have to say like, okay, well, what do the facts say? Well, if the kids are dying, if
Well, not all the kids are dying, and it's quite possible that mother's milk from a human mother is sufficient. Now, I think I want to take a tangent on this because this is an example. This never seems to be working with you, but to give you different angles onto things, um, I believe that veganism, is more ethical, and especially in the 21st century, now that all we know about nutrition, perfectly healthy thing. And frankly, if we were going to eat meats, probably a paleo approach and eating bugs. Um, those are probably more the meats that the gathering style that goes with our actual evolution. Um, but I'm not a vegetarian. And do you think I go around feeling a ton of guilt, or do I hide it, or do I pretend to be a vegetarian? Do I pretend to be perfect? No, I just make an honest assessment that I think, um, you know, there's better things and worse things, and I don't do all the better things. It's kind of like, it's better not to smoke a cigarette, but I don't believe in guilt about it. I mean, I don't think anybody's perfect, and it's good enough for me if we consciously are aware of what we've chosen and why. Because then sometimes, if you get in the habit of consciously being aware about it, sometimes you'll go, um, you know what? I will stop kicking homeless people, even though I really, and or I will stop eating meat. I don't need it. I figured it out, or whatever you want to do to change yourself, or not.
the kids are being hospitalized, if they're needing all these extra vitamin supplements and that's a pretty good indicator that the vegans are wrong about how they should treat children with that. And that's a pretty good indicator of child abuse. So we don't need to debate this emotionally when the evidence is there.
Well, I think you show a lot of delusion here. If you don't think that people that believe in social justice, like the people that believe that veganism's probably a good thing, great thing, and think they should have a chance to try raising a child that way, and not everybody will figure it out, but that you believe in freedom of individuals to try that. If you honestly think that, I believe that I also don't believe in taking the data overall, um, you're insane. More likely, we're going to find out some people do create a balanced vegan diet for their children, possibly having to require human mother's milk to get the animal fats, in youngest infancy. See, the thing is, I would be more likely than at that research to go, okay, if you want to have a vegan baby, you need to do this, 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 and this. And that you need vitamin pills is not necessarily a vote against it. I mean, I need a jacket to go outside. That does not mean it's unhealthy to live at a place where I need a jacket unless I try to live there without a jacket.
So these now the things that don't require evidence, the things that are these emotional issues, is this bit about being triggered or microaggressions or whatever. and these are all soft topics. They don't matter at all. And
But you spend a lot of time talking about them, right? I mean, you should know by now I'm not a person that's big on that part, right? Yale being a safe space as opposed to an intellectually challenging space. I'm on the it should be intellectually challenging side, or do you know? Do you not know that? I don't know. You don't acknowledge any of these things. You don't acknowledge that I'm not complaining about being triggered. On the other hand, a microaggression is a real thing. Can you legislate it? No, but you know what you can do? You can look inside yourself and see when you're being a little passive aggressive or this or making an assumption from a framework that really you're over and you don't need that framework. Or at least consciously do it, not subconsciously.
the thing is that when you're growing up, when you're learning anything, you should have a healthy spirit of competition. You should want to better yourself. You should want to be as good as the next guy, if not better than the next
Do we need you to tell us this, what you should want as a child? Because I don't remember asking you.
guy. And to say that isn't all about ego. It's not all about self gratification. A person who
I'll roll a
is better,
cigarette here, so I
right,
let you go
who
for a while.
develops their mind, develops their body, they can help others, right, to be better. The competition helps others to be better. There will be some who will be hurt by that. And that's the way it's always been. And at least biologically, that's the way it's meant to be. That's the way systems function. And as humans, we have this ability to create these really abstract concepts. And we have the minds to say, okay, well, we have this abstract concept, and now we've set up a context. And within this context, or the context might be inside of a paradigm. And this paradigm is what we believe is good and bad, good or evil, whatever, right or wrong, what we think should happen. Right now, we know that anorexics, and I get criticized for this because I don't talk about anorexia enough, which is kind of weird. We know that an anorexic
That is weird.
might look at themselves in the mirror and see themselves as fat because they have this context in their mind, this paradigm, that somehow they are fat when they're actually starving to death, when they're actually emaciated. Well, where does that come from? Does that come from society?
Excuse me.
No, that doesn't come from society. It doesn't come from models, supermodels, whatever. That's it's just the opposite. It's something that's in their minds.
So, first of all, I need you to tell me where it comes from. And luckily, you could save us a lot, billions of dollars of psychological research by telling us where it comes from. And then, we're about to finish. I'm interested. I want to predict and see. Well, not predict, but it's in their mind. How to get in there. Where it didn't come from anywhere. Evolution.
It's an illusion that they've created. And this illusion is not created by the environment. It's not created by marketing.
Is it affected by those things? Yes. Yes, it is.
It's created by themselves, by their own isolation. What they've done is they've taken one problem and they've transmuted it. They've transcribed it into another problem, right? So
Well, I
they
agree
might
with
think,
you there.
well, I'm not very lovable, or I'm not a nice person, or whatever. And it might be a personality disorder, something that if they just worked on their personality, not that that's a small deal, but if they worked on their personality rather than starving themselves, they might not have to starve themselves. But see, they've transmuted this to something that's non-relative. They've made something relative that isn't relative. That
But
isn't
why?
relevant.
Yes, yes. But why that theory as opposed to something else? They could be thinking, I don't smell good enough. They could be thinking, my jokes aren't good enough. They could be thinking, I don't kill enough enemies. They could be thinking, I'm not liberal enough. They could be thinking, I'm not conservative enough. They could be thinking a million things, many of which other people do think. Why one theory rather than another? And I find it ludicrous that you don't think that there's a body image in the media that's coming from our traditional value system, the strict father or uh, whatever you want to call the 1,000-year-old establishment of ideas and women and what marriage is and how you're supposed to think your mother and father and all of those old traditional ideas. Um, you know, it seems ridiculous to me that you don't see how those ideas have been projected into every medium that man has invented, and they were projected very strongly into this birth of the visual medium of movies, print photographs, TV, internet streaming, advertising. You don't think it's just like you're just like, no, it's there. Where did it come from? It came from the place, the original place. And oh, by the way, somehow that makes it justified. It's the way things are supposed to
I
be.
can think of examples of this with
Why would
people who are
anything be the
obese.
way it
You'll see
isn't
people
supposed
who
to
are
be?
grossly obese, and they might have depression. Okay, so they have depression. They might have a medication for that. The medication might help them
Quiet tobacco.
gain weight, which too much weight, and that could be the medication, or it could be a problem with the depression itself.
I'm gonna have to go
But
smoke
that
this cigarette
happens a
now.
lot. Okay, so when this happens, a lot of these people, rather than try to get that corrected, rather than try to change their medications or try to somehow compensate for it by working out or going to the gym, whatever, they'll go to the hairdresser and have their hair done up. They'll go to
People want to be validated, and I don't think I have to validate them. Some SJWs think we should validate people more. I mean, that you should validate people more. I am more like people of like mind that want to make progress in this kind of stuff. We should validate people for all their flaws and I mean, I believe flaws are related to strengths, so we should validate each other. But not just because validation is good. There has to be a reason and a logic to it, or it's just a kind of a lie, right? And a feel-good lie is one of the worst kinds, most destructive lies.
the tattoo place and get tattoos done up because this makes them feel good about themselves. This boosts their ego, right? But all it is it's a distraction from the actual problem. And so I would say, for the most part, social justice warriors are themselves distracted from the real problems, the problems in their lives and the problems in other
Oh,
people's
that was
lives
an
and the problem.
interesting little segue there. So you're talking about anorexics, and suddenly the SJW is the anorexic. Here's about anorexia. And the problem is SJWs are like anorexics. I don't get it.
Problems in society. Now, to say that every
Here's another thing. How about this? Stop talking to the classes that are so-called the victimized classes by the society. I think everybody has been, in the sense that it's all working people. I'm not here saying I believe in women's rights because I'm an oppressed woman, or I mean, I'm left-handed, and there's some history of abuse of left-handed people. I barely even talk about it. You just think that the only reason you could possibly want to be an SJW is you're some sort of a deformed, psychologically disordered person, and you want to be accepted and validated anyway. No, Qntkka, there's another reason. That might have happened sometimes, but there's another couple reasons.
problem you have is a problem of society is ridiculous. I can say, boy, my house really needs cleaning. Actually, it does. And I can say, I really need to sweep this room, or I really need to throw these things out. But then I can say,
So what you're saying is that SJWs is 100% it's sour grapes. People mad about their situation. It's impossible to care about the situation in general. Or to see the improvements brought by the Mother Joneses of the world and want to be a part of that to help that happen. Doesn't happen, huh? No successful person would possibly worry about the injustices that others feel. Well, I think they would. You know why? Because if you don't solve those injustices, no matter how rich you are in your mansion in the city, you have to walk out in the same streets. And if people are sick with tuberculosis in the streets, then you're at risk. So even pure self-interest, but also human beings have an empathetic potential. And so we feel empathy sometimes, even if we have a home, if we're looking at people, slaves getting beaten. We might not have to be a slave to want justice.
I really don't feel like it because something bad happened on the way home from work. Somebody said something mean to me, and now I'm just not in the mood. I'm not going to clean that up. I'm just going to wait another day. And it's not my fault, of course. It's not my fault because somebody else hurt my feelings and made me feel that way. Somebody else triggered me. They microaggressed me. And so now I've set this thing in my mind where I don't have to work. I don't have to motivate because somebody else smacked me down.
So which of this applies to me?
Now, it has nothing to do, whatever this person said or done. It could be maybe they say something about my weight, right? And hey, you fatso, whatever. Okay, and so I go home and I'm like, oh, crying or whatever. And I decide I'm not going to do anything because I'm depressed because somebody said that, right? They're not relevant. They're not the same thing. This is a illusion that people use in their head. It's an excuse, right? And the excuse only serves to make you feel better in the short run. In the long run, it will come back to bite you in the ass. That's how that works. So the thing is too is like these SJWs, they see problems in systems, see problems in society, and some of the stuff they see is really obvious. It's stuff that everyone else sees, and you're like, well, what's the solution? Well, the solution is we should hire more women. The solution is we should raise everybody's wages, right? And we should open all the borders, right? We should just let everybody in, just let people do whatever the hell they want. And then the thing is that when you do that, and when you say you don't need police, and you don't need any governing systems, then you have chaos.
Okay, so I believe in unclosing the borders. They were open for 100 years. Which are the SJWs saying we don't need police? Is criticizing what the police do the same to you as saying we don't need them? So if we think when a policeman might have done a crime, or even if it's not a crime, should be, and that kind of thing, something improper, that means we believe there shouldn't be police. You see, you're a little hyperbolic in your interpretation of things a lot.
Yes, right? If people call you on that, if they follow you up on that, if they do your bidding as an SJW, then you will have chaos. And what that means is you will have people stealing stuff from you. You will have people violating your rights. You will have people who feel entitled to all your stuff. You'll have people that don't respect your life or your accomplishments or your personhood. That will happen. And of course, the liberal argument, and this goes with the difference with liberals and conservatives, the liberal argument from a spiritual standpoint, which is how this stuff started before it was politics, right?
Do you think it would really be social justice if what we were saying is that we have to let certain different kinds of thieves steal from us and abuse us other than the other kinds of thieves?
Is this idea that people will generally do the right thing, will do the good thing, if they're left in a state of total freedom, right? And we know that this is wrong. This does not work. It might work with some people.
But you're telling us that our problem is we think we need to do something about you because people left alone and you should just be left alone. Fucking A, man. You're on both sides of this. You don't see that. So you're just making an argument of why the kind of SJW, not me, but the kind you're criticizing, why they do what they do, because they don't think you can be left alone to your own devices. And you just said you agree. It's just you believe different people can't be left alone to it. And me, I think you can all be kind of not left alone, but you could be allowed to think whatever you want. We have this big conversation, and then as certain sides look silly, they're less likely to influence behavior.
But we also know that ultimate power corrupts ultimately, that kind of thing. And so on the other hand, you have the conservatives, And the conservatives are of the belief that people will do the wrong thing. They will be evil if they're given the total freedom. They will do the wrong thing. So we have to put restrictions on people. And see, either philosophy, either spiritual philosophy or political philosophy, is easy to overreach. It's easy to say, okay, we're going, if you're on that conservative end, you're going to say, okay, we're going to censor everyone's speech. We're going to do this, do that. You can only say this. You can only do that. You can only go here. You can only go there. And what's funny is that that's become the liberal stance. The liberals have become the diehard conservatives, and the conservatives have become the liberals, right? So now the liberals are about freedom and all this other stuff. You can say whatever you want, do whatever you want, whatever. Okay, but now we see the conservatives doing that, right? The conservatives are the free speech advocates. So we've got this topsy-turvy kind of thing where both sides have kind of changed positions, but they're two heads of the same beast, and it's all about control.
Yeah.
And control, submission,
right.
and chaos, order.
The people that are for free speech still are,
and how much are you
many
going to allow?
liberal organizations.
I think feminism, based on a delusional belief to begin with, is something that hurts society. I think that the whole social justice warrior thing hurts society when you tell people, to watch their microaggressions or their privilege or whatever.
So, and why do we need you to save society from being hurt? How are you different from a social justice warrior? It seems to me you just have a different view of justice. You think rape fantasy is natural, so you shouldn't tell people not to have it or that it's unhealthy. That's rude. You have to validate them. And I'm like, you also said, I don't have to validate people. Leaving people to their own devices isn't a good idea. So, what?
You should consider that everyone, well, most people have abilities, have intelligence, hopefully have the use of their arms and legs, their fingers, all that, and can work different jobs, can be good at some jobs, bad at others, but that everybody, idealistically, we want everyone to have a shot, everyone to be able to work for themselves, to better themselves. But this SJW thing, this totally removes that idea of personhood, of agency. And I think that's probably my biggest problem with that, is that...
Well, I'd like to just talk about whatever my version of liberalism is. I call it progressive libertarianism. Maybe you have no problems with it, but I'm assuming you do because of various positions I have that you are criticizing for totally other reasons other than the reasons I have them.
There's this whole removal of responsibility and agency. And the thing is that if you're easily led, if you're just going to do the populist thing, whether that's an SJW thing or not, okay, then you're going to be manipulated. If you're easily led, somebody will be there to manipulate you. And you can't blame the person doing the manipulation if you're willfully playing into that just because you're lazy. So to summarize, what I'm getting from the SJWs is the same lazy arguments, the same irrelevant arguments, and the same evasion of dealing with real issues. And other than joking around with them, other than them being the butt of comedy, I don't take them serious until they try to actually take rights away from people. And that's what they do. They try to take rights away from people.
Right.
Try to tell them what games you can play, what stuff you can watch.
When. No, telling you that they think you're an asshole for playing a certain kind of game or an asshole for making a certain kind of game, that's not trying to take shit away from you. Just telling you, hey, you're acting like an asshole. Oh, I'm sorry, Qntkka. You should never be told that anything you like isn't okay. Do you want a participation prize for liking what you like? I mean, it doesn't make any sense what you're saying, right? Nobody's taken away those things from you. Just because we're criticizing, you said, well, what's the next step? Well, you might be the kind of person that wants to take away everything you've ever criticized in society and take it away from society. But the ACLU isn't that way. The Electronic Frontier Foundation isn't that way. I'm not that way.
And at the same time, we see these people telling us we have to accept pedophiles and we have to accept Sharia law or whatever, So.
Oh my God.
So
okay, yeah, show me the one that said you have to accept Sharia law. Fuck.
There's no logic or rhyme or reason to it. It's just one group of people.
Look, with this kind of thing, you don't want to. Okay, I'll let you finish.
They may have different groups within that group. They may have individuals with very different tastes and desires and motivations within that group, but they're banding together to try to take control of another group of people. And ultimately, that comes down to your personal freedoms. And If you want to give up your personal freedoms to these SJWs, I can't tell you not to do that. I can't tell you that's the wrong thing to do. I mean, I can, but you're going to do what you're going to do. So um, you have to understand where that's going, and you have to understand that that's a gateway kind of thing. You know, you're letting them put their foot in the door. You can stop it if you stop it early, if you nip it in the bud. But it's your choice, and I can't tell you how to choose.
Okay, so I think you're living in a deluded, crazy world where, for example, a feminist is also telling you to tolerate Sharia law. But not me, but some imaginary feminist, or you could find some crazy person, but not anybody working for now says that. You could go find a tenured professor to say anything, or that is already saying anything, but it's look, you're in a world where you think I support Sharia law. Why? Because an oppressed people thinks it. No, you don't want to learn what I really think. So that's why I'm saying we either split the country up or realize that, oh, this is a battle where one of us gets eliminated. I don't want to do that. I'd rather split the country up. But if we don't want to do that and we got to make this marriage work, and obviously we're not going to work out a compromise, then your plan needs to go. So it's up to you. You can't whine to me with SJW sounding arguments about how you should be left alone with your natural biology and don't tell you what the. Too bad. You either get your own space and then you could discuss it with people that more agree with you, or we're going to battle it out because I don't want any of the Trump presidencies. I don't want any of these Republicans that talk about how you can't get pregnant from rape, and or Sessions was saying, Senator Sessions, that well, even if it was true what Trump had described in that bus doesn't sound like assault. Oh yeah, it does to anybody that knows the law. That would be assault. And then it's like he's only been accused of doing what he said he did, and there's only, there's women from the Miss Teen America or whatever it was that say, yeah, he did that walking into the dressing room thing that he told Howard Stern. Oh, but we don't know. Well, yeah, we don't know. We don't know. Okay, but since I think that's questionable, I also must support Sharia law. Yeah, that's real logical there. And you're going to really win. You've got the future in your hands there, Qntkka. So look, I'm not worried that I have to have this conversation. The trend is clear, okay, to me. I'm willing to have it. I'm interested in learning how you think. But the main thing I've learned is that you have absolutely no intention of learning how the individuals you're talking to think. You think you could come up with the generalization about how all feminism, and at the same time you'll admit that there's many different classifications of feminism, but you ignore the definition I use, you ignore all the details, and then you're going around like some fucking crazy right winger that liberals want Sharia law. Yeah, right. Like I'm going to endorse Sharia law, which specifically violates the things I'm telling you I believe in. That is stupid. Or I'm going to support murder as long as an ethnic minority does it. Really? Is that really that you really think that's you got the gist of it, huh? I don't think so. I think you should try harder to understand what you're really arguing against. And maybe you need to take your head away from the most unreasonable people and do a little more like what I do. See, if I'm looking about the anti SJW argument, I find people like Noel Plum. Okay, I watch Thunderfoot. I try to watch whoever is best representing it. You should try.